Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Building Lady Garnet, the first new trading wherry since 1912. Now in the last episode, I was lofting the lines of the wherry. This time out, it's time to start making the station molds. There are 9 stations, and these are set up temporarily on top of the keel to give me a shape to bend the planks around. Now, if you watch the series that I did on building the 9-foot clinker dinghy, you'll remember that I did station molds for that as well, because once again it was clinker planked, and using station molds is standard procedure for clinker planked boats. Now before I start work on the station molds, there were just a couple things that I wanted to talk about. The first is I wanted to address how the lofting process went overall, which is something I didn't really do in the last video. And I also wanted to tell you about my decision on what fastenings to use for Lady Garnet. So after I put out the last video on the lofting, Tim commented and asked me a couple of questions, the first of which was, how long did the lofting process actually take? Now, I'm not entirely sure how long it took to make the grid, because I just drew the grid in bits and pieces after finishing work for the day, and it was kind of spread out a little bit, so I'm not really too sure. But the actual lofting of the lines took probably just under 5 full days. I probably could have done it quicker, but haste makes waste, and I just thought I would take the time to make sure that I got it right and that I was happy with everything. Speaking of being happy with things, that was Tim's second question, which was I happy with how the lofting process went? This, of course, is something I should have addressed at the end of the last video, but I was in a bit of a hurry to get it out because it had been a little while since I'd done an update, and I just kind of forgot to do a sort of recap, which is why I'm doing it now. And overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how the lofting went. There were a few issues. The main mistake that I made, I'm going to head over to the lines now and show you what happened. So it's right about here that I made my major mistake. Now you see this line here has the D, that is the datum line, and that should be the underside line of the actual keel. And in the plans, it is. But where it gets confusing is that Lady Garnet's keel is going to be slightly deeper than the keel in the plans. It's not an issue. All I have to do is just add a little bit onto the bottom of the keel. But the important thing to remember is that all the measurements that I took and plotted were measured from this datum line. Now, when it came time to draw this line here, now this is the rabbit line, and basically when the planks, the garboard planks, sit up against the keel, they sit at an angle, so you have to cut a rebate, so like that. And the rabbit line is the point where the garboards begin. And being a very silly person, instead of plotting the rabbit line using the measurements that I had written in the table of offsets, which were measured up from the datum line where everything was measured from, I went and had a look at the actual pieces that I have for the keel, because they're already to size when I bought them, and I measured off of that and plotted the rabbit line and figured it was X amount above the bottom of the keel, and then measured that from this point here. The problem is, as I say, you can see this red line here, which I have now added in. This is the actual bottom of the keel. So when I measured the rabbit line up, it's that distance from the bottom of the keel to the rabbit line in the actual boat. But according to the measurements, it should only be that. So what I did, of course, was I ended up putting the rabbit line about there, and it wasn't until I had already drawn several other lines that I plotted this point, and I went, hang on, that's physically impossible that that point can be below the rabbit line. There's something wrong. And I puzzled it for a few minutes, and then I realized what had happened, and I had to go all the way along and rub out the entire rabbit line. And yeah, then redraw it and then fix the lines that I'd started to draw using the incorrect rabbit line. So, needless to say, I've made sure that the next thing I did after that was I went and marked in various places. I've also done it up forward as well, as you can see, and also aft, showing where the actual bottom of the keel is, just to make sure that I didn't get confused again during the lofting process. So that was a little bit annoying, but it was really the only major mistake that I made. So the other area where things can potentially go wrong, as I mentioned in the lofting video, is that when you are drawing the lines, you're using all of the given points from the table of offsets. Those were the measurements that I took from the small lines drawing and multiplied the full size. But you have to make sure that you're getting a fair line, a nice smooth curve everywhere. And if you have to miss one of the written points, then you have to miss it. The important thing is that these lines have to be fair in the body plan, the half-breadth plan, and the profile plan, and all the points have to be the same. So if you've plotted a point in the body plan and in the half-breadth plan, but you find that in the profile plan that point has to be changed to make a fair line, then you have to go back and change the points in the body plan and the half-breadth plan. And what can happen is you can have most of the lofting done, and then you come to do just the final few lines, and that really tells you how well you've done, because sometimes you can do it and you find that you just have to go back and go round and round in circles, so it just makes a mess of everything. And actually, that went really well. What I found is that I had to redraw a section of Station 1 and, from memory, a bit of water lines 3 and 4, and I can't remember if I had to make any adjustments on any of the other stations. I don't think I did. I just remember that I was actually really pleased. You know, I started plotting these lines and then I thought, okay, you know, I can't get away with that. That's not fair. I'm going to have to go and change these. And I actually spent more time looking at it and thinking, can I get away with that? And then deciding, no, I really can't. And then when I went and fixed it all, I discovered that actually it hardly took any time to fix. It just made the lines look better, but there was not really much to change. There were just a few points in those 2 water lines and then in the station. And it ended up not taking too much time at all. So I was really pleased with that. It was certainly, okay, so I've done lofting 3 times. Once when I was at the boat with the College in Lowestoft, once when I did the 9-foot dinghy, and now this time. And the Wherry lofting by far went the best, apart from, as I say, that one error that I made with the keel. Everything else went pretty smoothly, so actually I'm really happy with how the lofting went, which is nice. So let's move on to the question of fastenings now. First of all, thank you so much to everyone who commented and gave their opinions on the fastenings. I do think there was a general consensus. The question that I had really was, do I use marine grade stainless steel, or do I pay more for the slightly better quality of silicon bronze? Most of you suggested silicon bronze. I'm actually going to take Brian's advice. What he advised was use silicon bronze below the waterline and then use a marine grade stainless steel above it, and that's what I'm going to do. So all of the keel bolts and all the bolts for holding together all the various components of the backbone are going to be 3/4 inch silicon bronze rod, and then the planks are going to be fastened onto the frames with silicon bronze screws. The fastenings that go between the frames, so the plank to plank fastenings, are going to be copper nails and rows. I pretty much had already decided that. Then above the waterline, of course, what you have to bear in mind is that the waterline of any boat is not an absolute definite thing, because when the boat heels over, of course, that goes underneath the water, and with a Wherry in particular, depending on how much cargo she is carrying, she'll be sitting lower in the water. So I'm definitely going to err on the side of caution and use silicon bronze higher than the actual given waterline. Once I get past that point, I'm going to switch over to using the marine grade or A4 stainless steel. And again, it will be screws going through the planks into the frames, and once again, copper nails and rows for the plank-to-plank fastenings. Typically, you wouldn't want to use stainless steel with copper, but above the waterline, that should be fine because there isn't that risk of galvanic corrosion. Once I get above the hull to the decks and the cabin sides, I'm going to just use regular A2 stainless steel screws. To be honest, I could probably just use the A2 stuff for the planks that are above the waterline, but I'd rather, again, be safe than sorry. So for the hull, it's going to be stainless steel that is marine grade quality above the waterline. Below, silicon bronze, and then everything that is above the hull will be A2 stainless steel. So that's the plan. So right now I am busy sourcing silicon bronze rod to start making those bolts for the keel, because it won't be too long before I'm actually laying the keel. But before I do that, time to make the station molds. So the station molds are made using the station lines that I drew as part of the body plan. There are 9 of those. Now, the important thing to remember is that we don't actually make the station molds to fit to these exact lines. Now, the reason for that is that these lines are drawn to show the shape at the outside of the planking. The planking, of course, is 1.25 inches thick. So what you need to do when you make the station molds is make them to follow the shape of the line, but 1.25 inches inside of it. So with that in mind, I'm going to mark points all along the lines, measuring 1.25 inches inside. The exception is the lower 11 inches on each of the station molds. The reason for that is that the garboard planks, the first planks to go on the boat, which are 11 inches wide, are going to be 1.75 inches thick. Now what that means for the station molds, of course, is that they're going to have an indentation in them for that lower 11 inches. I had a choice. I could do it that way, or I could draw the station molds 1.25 inches inside the whole way along and just have the garboard planks sticking out further, so to speak. But the problem with that is that they wouldn't sit nicely into the rebate of the keel and hog. So let's get going. First things first, I've taken a few pieces of cheap softwood and connected them together roughly in the shape of station mold 1, a half breadth of which is on the right side of the body plan. And then, as I said, I need to mark the inside line of the planking. So now that I made the timber for 1/2 of station mold 1, and I've marked these points all along it, the next thing is I need to transfer these points onto the piece of softwood. Now the way I'm going to do that is using screws laid on their side on these points, put the one on top of that, hit it with a hammer, and it will pick up those points, and then I can join them together and cut them to shape. Now, besides on these points, there's a few other places where I need to pick up some points. Now you can see what I've drawn here. This is the actual garboard. And this square here is what I call the keel. I will talk a little bit about terminology in just a moment, but for the moment, this is the keel, and this piece here is the hog, which will be bolted down onto it. Now, these are the initial shapes of them, but they are going to be quite drastically changed because of the rebates that I need to put in for the planks, which you can see. This is the garboard plank coming in. So the keel, this section here, at station 1, all will have to be removed. And with the garboard, quite a lot of it's going to be removed up at station 1, and the same with station 9, obviously getting less and less as you get more towards the center of the boat. Now, where do these station molds fit in? Well, the station molds sit on top of the hog. I nearly pointed at the wrong line there. This does get a little bit confusing. As I was saying, the station molds sit on top of the hog. So what I need to do is just place a few screws along the top of the hog, so that way I know where to actually cut off the station. Now, station 1 and 9, and possibly a few others, are different from the rest of them, because if we think ahead to example station, say, well, let's just say station 2, actually, because I already had just sort of had this marked. But you can clearly see that where the garboard's going to go is going to be, say, there. So what the station mold for station 2 is going to do is it's going to sit on top of the hog, but then it's going to drop down around it as well. Well, actually, that'll help hold it in place even better. And in fact, when I made the tender for Lady Garnet, the way it was shaped, all of the station molds did that. So for those stations, I will need to also mark these points as well. So with regards to clarifying the terminology, back in the day, the wherry keel and hog would often be made from one solid piece of timber. And if you look at some of the literature that's been written about wherries, there is a lack of consistency in terms of what that was called. Some people call it the keel and some people call it the hog. And since I'm making it into separate pieces, I'm calling the lower one the keel and the one that goes on top of it the hog. That just seems easier to me. Confusingly, there is actually another keel that's going to be in play, which I'll talk more about in the next episode. It is the removable keel that will be bolted on to the underside of the regular keel. But as I say, I'll talk more about that in the next episode when I'm laying the keel. Now, the next stage is to make the mirror image half of the station. First of all, I put down the sod I've made to check the fit, and then I mark all the grid lines, the perpendiculars and horizontals, onto the station mold. Then I clamp it down onto more pieces of softwood and draw around it to make the shape. But just the shape is not enough. I have to know how to line it up, and that's why I transfer the marks of the grid onto the new piece. And there you have it. Station number 1 complete. So what's the next step, I hear you ask? Well, that's simple. Do it 8 more times. So that's the station molds nearly done. At time of filming, I still have one more to do, number 5, the center station mold. So I'm going to carry on and finish that up, and then in the next episode, I'm going to start laying the keel. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Building Lady Garnet, and thank you to everyone who has supported the project either through the fundraiser or by becoming a Patreon. It is greatly appreciated, I can assure you. And I hope to see you all in the next episode. As I say, that's going to be a very exciting one because I'm going to start laying the keel. So I hope I'll see you then.